So, welcome everybody to our Spiritual Experiencers group. And I'm so happy that you're all with us. Tonight we have a beautiful speaker. Her name is Julie Cluff. And I met Julie at an IN sharing group. And as soon as I heard her speak, I was just blown away by her and her story and her wisdom. And I just thought, wow, just wait till you hear. I'm just so happy and I feel really grateful that you are here to share your experiences and your life's journey with us. And so I'll just read a little bit about Julie, if I may. So Julie Cluff has always been aware of the world of spirits, but after her two youngest children died in a car accident, that connection became even more personal. Even in her darkest hours, she couldn't deny the miracles she witnessed and the angelic help that she had received. When a fog of grief lifted, she felt called to help others through grief. In her grief work, she began to receive more and more spirit messages for herself and others. Julie is an intuitive healer, channeler, grief specialist, and trainer. She is the host of Build a Life After Loss podcast and the author of the book Miracles in the Darkness. Recently, she wrote a brief ebook, Connecting with Your Angels, which is available free on her website, juliecluff.com. Her new book, My Journey with the Angels, is expected out in late 2024. Her personal mission can be summed up in one simple word: hope. For healing, divine connection, and happiness, Julie is first and foremost a wife, a mom, and grandma. She loves reading, movies, tennis, painting, and playing the piano. Welcome, Julie. I'm so happy you're with us.
I am so thrilled to be here. I'm so grateful for the invitation. It's really interesting. I have to give a little bit more background on how we met because I was familiar with IONS and had been for a little while. And I went on the website, I think it was January 2nd, and I was looking, and there's not a local group in Nashville. But I noticed there's online sharing groups, and I thought, and there was one in like an hour, and I actually had time. And so I registered for that meeting, and I can't tell you how much oxygen that meeting gave me. It was just so wonderful to be with other people who have had remarkable experiences, are open to remarkable experiences, and it was incredibly refreshing. So I'm really grateful to be here tonight.
With us, and I'm so happy that you just happened to be checking out IONS at that time, and we got to meet each other. So just
There's no accident.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so as Catherine mentioned, everything started on Mother's Day in 2007 when I was traveling across country with my three youngest children, and they were 12, 10, and 8. My son James, these were my three younger, we have 6 children. So the 3 younger children, and my son James was sitting up in the front with me, and Carrie and David were in the back seat. And we were traveling from our home where we lived in Houston at the time to visit grandparents in North Carolina. And we were having a remarkably good trip in the car, the kids in the back with their snacks, and we were really just enjoying the drive. We were used to long drives, and that was just part of what we did. We jumped in the car and went places. But about mid-afternoon, we were approaching Mississippi, um, the Mississippi-Alabama border, and I suddenly found myself asleep. I woke up. I'd fallen asleep at the wheel which was so shocking because it felt like just 2 minutes before, my daughter Carrie had moved seats. She was in the back seat. She's sitting next to her brother, and she said she was started to get annoyed. You know how sisters get annoyed with their brothers. And she's like, I'm going to move over. So she'd been sitting right next to him. They'd been playing, and she moved over. And I looked back and I saw her changing seats, and I heard her, saw her snap in her seatbelt. And as she moved, she said, Happy Mother's Day. I love you. And what felt like 5 minutes later, I woke up bumping along the grass in between the westbound and the eastbound lanes of highway. And when I tried to pull the vehicle back up on top on the back up on the highway, driving an SUV, I felt the wheels lift off the ground, and we began to roll, and we rolled and we rolled. And we landed, we went across 2 lanes of highway. We landed on the other side. And when we stopped, I couldn't see anything because I was temporarily blinded. Um, but I could hear my son next to me crying. So I knew he was okay, but I also knew he was hurt, but I knew he was alive. Like it was such a, yeah, it was just a shocking experience. And as my eyesight came back, and I was frantically calling for Carrie and David, and there was no answer. There was no answer. And you know, my fears grew and grew, and my eyesight began to come back, and I'm in panic mode, and I'm physically, emotionally, in every way in shock. And I start looking around the vehicle, and I'm just seeing all the broken glass. I'm seeing everything everywhere. I'm seeing all the shattered, just it was just destruction everywhere. um but Carrie and David weren't in the car. And then I noticed off to my left people gathering, and I realized that Carrie and David had been thrown from the car. Immediately after this happened, when I would think about what I saw in that the grassy area there on the side of the highway, I uh, there were I saw, like, I saw these people. But then as I started thinking about it more and more, there were no cars on the side of the road. So I realized later that we were in this space between life and death. And no doubt there were many angels, seen and unseen. And a man came to the car. I knew that Carrie and David, they either had both died or they were both alive, because they were unusually close. In fact, when we went after they died and we were looking for photos and so forth, and to um, to celebrate their life, I realized how many photos I had of the two of them hugging each other. And that was just the sweetest thing. But I knew in that moment that they were either both alive or both dead. I could not imagine one here without the other. And they took James and I to one hospital. A separate ambulance went to a different hospital. And I laid on a striker board in the hospital asking how Carrie and David were. They were in a totally different hospital. And so every time a nurse came by, and anytime anybody came by, I would ask, and they would say, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. We're trying to find out. At the scene of the accident, there was a gentleman that came to the door of the car, and he gave me his cell phone so that I could call my husband. Ooh, that was just thinking about that phone call. It's hard. You know, I was in a complete panic, and in that space, of sitting in that car, my mind just kept going to, how can I turn back the clock 5 minutes? How can I turn back the clock 5 minutes? I mean, it was all I could think about. And then I began screaming, I killed my kids. I killed my kids. I killed my kids. And so when I called my husband, I just said, we've been in a terrible accident. And I don't know if Carrie and David are dead or alive. So I laid in the hospital waiting to hear, and I realized later that they were waiting for my aunt and uncle to arrive who lived in Mississippi, a couple hours away. And when they arrived, they put me on the phone with Ron, my husband. He was at the airport in Houston trying to get a flight to Mississippi where we were in the hospital. And he told me that they didn't make it. Um, and we were in the hospital for several days. My son James needed emergency surgery. Okay, that is a lot. I know it's a lot. I but I what is remarkable is the miracles that we experienced that day, in before the accident, during the accident, and after the accident. And so, and what I would like to do is really focus on that. And one was that before the accident even happened, I'd been listening to some music, and there was, it was a band that kind of an obscure band that someone had sent me the CD of, and there was a song in there about a woman who had lost her children. And I remember as I was driving, as I listened to that song more than once, I remember as I was driving thinking, how would somebody get through that? What would they do? But there were so many things that happened even the month before, which I talk about in the book, but I wish I could, I wish I could share everything with you, but there's only so much time, right? At any rate, while the car was rolling, I heard a voice in my head that said, bring your arm in. And somehow I had the wherewithal. I have no idea how, but I remember bringing my left arm. I was, driving the car, bringing my left arm in. And after that, somebody called me and said, I just saw somebody on TV who was in a rollover accident like you were, and they lost their arm. 2 years later, I met a woman who had lost her arm in a rollover accident. The angels were there. Our helpers were there in the accident. Afterwards, in the hospital, I overheard a couple of the nurses, like I said, my son needed emergency surgery. And I overheard a couple of nurses talking about how Dr. Rush was there and what was he doing there. The hospital was named after his family. It was Rush Hospital. He was the surgeon. Dr. Rush was the surgeon who developed the emergency procedure that my son needed. That's no accident. It was just remarkable. And even in the first 24 hours, I received a couple of messages somehow that got through all the heaviness of this experience. And one was to not be concerned about what other people say after the accident. I was being led to let go of anything that people said to me after the accident. Whether it is they're in a better place or any of the other platitudes that people share. And they do it well-meaning. I've said things even after the accident, sometimes to people who are grieving, and I've thought, oh my goodness, why did I say that? We're all doing the best we can. So that was the first thing. The other thing that I felt immediately after the initial, laying there in the hospital, was I felt this assurance that Carrie and David were safe forever, that they were okay. There was no doubt in my mind that they were okay on the other side. How I was going to get through it, how my family was going to get through it, that was another story. But there was no doubt that they were okay. The other thing that happened is a couple weeks before the accident, I had a friend, an energy healer friend, who had walked me through a visualization, a meditation, um, and it was, and she had me in this visualization. She had me meet Jesus in a field, and we had an exchange in this visualization. And while I laid there in the hospital, not knowing whether Carrie or David, what their fate was, how the reality was, no matter what happened at that point, they were either going to be severely injured or gone. But I laid there with moments of peace because I was able to go back into that visualization. And so I had these moments of peace, and this was like the air in my journey for the next 3 years, was having had that visualization. And every once in a while, when I had the wherewithal, when I could bring myself there to go into that space where I was loved, where I was cared for, where I felt that um, that presence, that presence. And that was a beautiful experience, even though it was tremendously challenging. But afterwards, after everything, I was dealing with PTSD. I was dealing with complicated grief, diagnosed PTSD and complicated grief. I went through this tremendously challenging 3 years, really challenging 3 years. But about, let's see, it was September. So the accident happened in May because it was on Mother's Day. The accident happened on Mother's Day. And then in September, I had walked into a drugstore, and it was before Halloween and all the costumes were out. And I saw this costume. I saw this witch's costume, and I thought, oh, Carrie would love this. I need to get, that was my immediate reaction, because my system still was not adjusted to the idea that they were no longer there. So I would keep doing this thing where I would think of, I'd see something, I go, oh, David would like that. Oh, they would have fun doing this. And then my mind, then immediately I'd be brought back, like that punch in the gut. I'd be brought back to they're not here. And so I had this thought that she would love this costume, and immediately that heaviness hit again, that she's not here. And in my mind, I said, why did this have to happen? And that angelic voice came to me again and said, they're right where they're supposed to be. And so in my mind again, I said, but why did it have to happen like this? It's one thing when you've been hit by a drunk driver and you can put all of your anger and your frustration and your blame on someone else. But when you're the one that did it, it's heavy. There's no words. I mean, I'm trying the best I can to describe how that felt, but and so when I asked that question, why did it have to happen this way? Immediately I heard, and this is the beauty of this, of angels, of spirit. Immediately I heard, how would you have liked it to happen? that having that in a question, in the form of a question, allowed my mind to search, and allowed my mind to think of other scenarios where they might have passed away. In fact, 2 years well, no, 5 years before, when they were 3 and 5, they fell out a 2-story window together, and they were okay. So it was like, even my mom said later, she's like, if they hadn't had that strange accident, she says, I don't know if I would have been able to accept that this was meant to be. We had just moved into this house in Houston, and they were upstairs. They'd gone upstairs, and we were downstairs, and our dog was in the backyard, and they had opened the window to talk to the dog in the backyard. And they both leaned on the window, and the screen fell out, and they fell out with the screen, both of them, in this bizarre accident. And they were fine, other than Carrie had 2 fractured wrists. It was minor, but she had to have casts on her wrists for 2 days. And people were coming over and bringing us things. Oh, she was so sweet. People were coming over and, bringing them things, and happy to see them, and just kind of like the get well cards and balloons and different things. And she was 5 years old, and she said to me, after a few days of this, she says, "You think somebody could bring me a Barbie?" I just I just loved that. I thought that was so funny. 5-year-olds and the way they think. But yeah, so it was just a super challenging time, but there kept being these little points. And but at the 3-year mark, at okay, I had lost my brother to suicide years before, and I had gone through a really painful divorce from my first husband. I had 3 children from my first husband, with my first husband, and then remarried, and we had 3 more children, and these are the youngest of our 3 children. But we all, my first husband had, we had divorced. He'd left the country. It was, we raised Ron and I raised the kids together, so they were quite young when we got married. Let's see, where am I in my story? Let me tell. Okay, so I was familiar with grief. That's what I wanted to share with you. So that really helped me, because I don't I remember, I can specifically remember when we were back in Houston. It was not long after we had come home. I can specifically remember being in the backyard, sitting in a chair, and thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but maybe there's a way that I can. I remember that moment so clearly, thinking that maybe there's a way that I can come back, because I remembered how hard and devastating it was when my brother died. And those first few months thinking, I will never be okay. I remember feeling like I will never be okay. And then over time, I was able to, I like to say, metabolize that grief, metabolize that sadness, metabolize those heavy emotions that came with his passing. And so I had this thought that, perhaps there was a way that the same thing could happen, but it was hard to imagine in that time frame. But at 1.5 years, so I'd been really, really patient with my grief. I knew that this was normal. It was, I can't even, I mean, I wrote a book about it, and I didn't even do it justice. Because it was such a foggy time, and to really, and all that pain, and just the anguish that my husband and I both were experiencing together, and it was challenging. So at 1.5 years, I kind of got impatient with my grief. I was like, when is this going to be over? And I started to think, um, I started to feel like I should be doing better. I'd had a therapist early on say, we can choose to be happy. You look like a strong woman. We can choose to be happy. At a year and a half, I was like, I don't even know how to choose to be happy. I have no idea how to do that. And I had been seeing a therapist. She was helping with PTSD and all of it, but I was tanking at the 3-year mark. Like I was in bad shape. And then I had a miracle happen again. And that was actually a leader at the church that we were attending who said, I feel like I need to give you a blessing. And he performed the laying on of hands, and the lights came on. Like I was literally drowning. I was like in this such a dark space, and it was like the darkness lifted. The darkness lifted, and I felt like, and I will tell you, tonight I was thinking about, sharing with you guys tonight, and I was looking at all my journals, and I didn't start journaling until after the kids died. But I this journal, I had forgotten that at the beginning of this journal in March, in March of 2010, so it'd been almost 3 years after the kids died, I had begun just writing some things down because my therapist was like, I'd had a bad reaction to a medication that they had tried to put me on. I'm very sensitive to medications. I just can't use medications. And so that didn't go well. She's like, I need you to journal some things. She asked me to journal all of my loss experiences. I didn't know I still had this. I just discovered I still had this tonight. Um, but I filled 2 pages with all the losses that I had experienced up until that time. Um, and I was reading through it before we got on this call, and I was like amazed. I mean, there's things on here I've forgotten about. Okay, so I wake up, I'm feeling better. I'm like, but I'm I'm different. I'm different than I've ever been before. I'm like, and I can't, this is so hard to explain, but I'm happier than I've ever been. And that is hard to say because you'd be like, well, how can you be happier than you've ever been when your kids have died? You and I can't explain that. I can't fully explain that, except that my eyes were opened. I saw things so much differently. I recognized like the beauty of life. It's just remarkable. But my spiritual sensitivity was heightened in a way that I can't explain. Like I said, I didn't even realize that I was looking at my journals, and I realized that in March I'd filled like 4 or 5 pages in this journal of of just like doing okay. This, like little snippets, because that's all I could process in my brain, because I was my husband actually had a business trip that May, at the beginning of May, and I was doing so poorly. He took me with him because he was afraid to leave me at home. Um, and then when I came home, I had this miraculous experience of going from the depth of despair and not knowing how to live life to being awake and being alive. And it was just after that. So this was so fascinating to find this. It was the beginning of June when I started to write down um, what I was experiencing, and writing down things that I was learning about miracles. And I was flipping through it. I was like, there was the page about miracles, and I was investigating miracles, and I was writing all these things down, um, and then I was learning over time. I was learning to communicate with my kids on the other side. I was learning to communicate with my brother. I was learning to trust my instincts, and trust my inner knowing. And then in 2012, so just so we're clear on the timeline, accident happened in 2007, miraculous healing in 2010. 2012, I was introduced to a man who had gone through some really challenging mental health issues. And we were out, I was out to lunch with my mom, who introduced me to her friends. She's like, you've got to meet this couple. And so we'd gone to lunch, and he was sharing his journey and how he was helping other people now that he had gotten his health back. And then my mom turned to me and she said, Julie, tell them your story. And I was like, I can't tell that, I'm like, you mean that story? And so I did. I said, well, my kids died in 2007. And so I shared, a snippet of it. And as we were leaving the restaurant, this man caught me by the arm and he said, Julie, you're supposed to do something with this. And it was like a lightning bolt. It was like, if it was as if God stood in front of me in that moment and said, you're supposed to do something with this. It was that impactful. This almost complete stranger that I just met a couple hours before. Um, and then I spent the next few years trying to figure out what that was. I spent the next little while trying to figure out what that was. And then eventually I became a coach and studied grief, and developed a grief healing program, and began coaching people, and developing my intuitive skills. That as I was doing that, and I was communicating, I was learning to communicate with my kids across the veil. I was learning to communicate with my brother across the veil. And then as I was working with people and they would find me in these miraculous ways, I'm like, um, your kids or your husband or whoever they'd lost, I mean, there was just no doubt that they were connecting us. Like there was some divine intervention, there was some divine help, helping us get connected. And then as we would meet, I would often feel their child or their husband, or the person that I would feel them there in the room. But I didn't know how to communicate that. I didn't know, like, I didn't share that with people. Sometimes I would, well, a lot of times I would hear messages and I would pass messages, but I wouldn't say, hey, your son just said. I would say, I would just kind of deliver the message. But over time, like, I was really feeling that. Then 2020, during shutdown, a good friend of mine lost her 27-year-old son to COVID. And that was just, I was devastated for her. At that time, she was living in a different state and I was living in a different state. And we hadn't talked to each other in a few years. But when I found out, I reached out to her immediately, and um, all the circumstances of, her son was living in a different state than she was, and it was a lot. And one day, a couple of weeks after he died, I was out running errands. And when I came back to my car, I'm in a parking lot. I come back to my car and I realize that her son is there. I don't see him, but I feel his presence there. And I felt like he had a message for his mom. So I pulled out my phone And I just started to write down everything that was coming through. And I wrote that message down. And it was about 3 months later before I felt like it was the correct timing to share that with her. Um, but that was the beginning of going, wait a second, what what is going on here? And then this past, okay, so in a year ago this month, in fact, I'm getting ready to go on this trip with the same group. A year ago this month, I was speaking on a cruise and we were cruising out of Los Angeles. We went to Cabo. We were going on a whale watching trip. My husband and I had booked a watching trip, and I was super excited about it because my daughter has gone whale watching before, and I never have. And I thought this is going to be fun. This is going to be great. But by the time it was an afternoon trip, by the time we got out there on the boat, well, I use the word boat loosely. It was really an oversized life raft. I mean, there was like 20 of us on it, but it was such a, I'm looking around, I'm like, everybody else is on boats and we're on this inflatable. I was uncomfortable. I was grumpy. I was like, the whales weren't showing up. And I was just like, this is silly. And I had spent several months before really studying angels and really getting connected with angels, and I had started to keep track. I'd started to record every time I I either felt Carrie or David around, or I felt a presence, or I felt a message. I started recording those things. I started recording when I saw number patterns that were meaningful. Um, I started to record my dreams and things like that. So we're out on this boat. I'm grumpy. Thinking this is not going to happen. This is going to end up being a dud of a whale watching trip. That's what I was thinking. This is going to be a dud. So and then I heard, Julie, you have angels. And as soon as I heard that, my spirit just lifted. And in my head, I began saying, thank you for bringing the angels close to our boat. Thank you for bringing the boat close to the whales. Thank you for bringing the whales close to the boat, and thank you for bringing the boat close to the whales. And I just kept saying that in my mind over and over and over again. And within 10 minutes, there were 3 whales off to the right of us just playing. I mean, it was a show. They were just playing in the water. And then a few minutes later, 3 more were on the left side of our boat. And then a few minutes later, like I'm talking within like 10, 15 minutes, there were 3 more whales in front of us. And then on top of that, there was a whole pod of dolphins swimming along the boat. I mean, I can't even express to you how glorious the scene was. I couldn't even take out my phone and take a picture. I couldn't even, because I couldn't take, I was just overwhelmed with love and gratitude for that experience. It was such a remarkable experience. And it was just beautiful. And our guide said, well, you guys have good energy. All the whales are showing up. You guys have good energy. And then there's and then after a time, he said, we've got to get back to the dock. And the whales started to dissipate. And then this one whale, and I don't even know what they call this, but he put his tail up in the air. You've probably seen this at like SeaWorld or something. It started slapping the water like he was waving, like 10, 12 times, like slapped the water. And then that was the end of our trip. It was beautiful. It was glorious. It was absolutely beautiful and fabulous. So then next day, the next day, I received a message in a meditation to begin teaching about angels. And so when I came home from that trip, I immediately scheduled a webinar and started teaching about angels. And that has been a wonderful, beautiful experience to teach about angels and to start writing about angels more and more, to start sharing experiences about angels and recognizing that we are so supported and so incredibly loved when we, you know, in those darkest hours. I remember my therapist one day, she was very intuitive, extremely intuitive. And I remember her saying to me one day, "Julie, can you feel the people in the room?" She was feeling, she was feeling that presence from the other side in the room. And I was like, no, I can't feel anything. So I was numb to it. Well, this all further developed, and in this last year was just another incredible year of learning and new things and learning about new skills, and and this whole experience where I was feeling the presence of clients, um, family members, and I was feeling this help from the other side, and they would put images in my mind, and they would put ideas in my mind, and they would lead the sessions, and um, but I was doing all that, without openly saying, "Hey, this is what's happening," right? Well, in September, I guess it was October or August of last year, yeah, August of last year, I was teaching an angel workshop, and somebody said, "What about Akashic records?" And I said, "I don't know what that is. I honestly had not heard of that before. Have any of you heard of that before?" Yeah, I'm sure you have. You guys are the ones in the know. And so anyway, somebody asked about Akashic records, and I just frankly said, "I don't know what that is." But you better believe I looked it up. The night before, I had had this dream that really stood out. It felt extremely significant. And I had discovered that I could interpret dreams because somebody on Facebook had said, "I had this dream. Can anybody tell me what it means?" And this thought came to me. I'm sure it was my guide saying, "Julie, why don't you try interpreting his dream?" And so I did on Facebook, of all things, somebody I don't know very well. And I said, "Okay, well, this is, these are what these symbols mean, and this is blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, that feels really correct." Like, "Oh, okay." But I'd had this significant dream the night before this woman asked about Akashic records. And then a couple days later, I was talking to my dear friend who has had a near-death experience, is very intuitive. And I told him about the dream, and he said, "Julie, you are in the Akashic records. You cannot make this stuff up." And and at the same time, I realized that there was um, a beautiful intuitive healer in my grief coach training that I do, who does Akashic record readings. And so I reached out to her, and she gave me Akashic record reading, and she told me where she got her training. And so within a month of hearing about Akashic records, was in a training, and I did a training, and and I started doing these Akashic record readings. But then I realized that um, really what I was doing was channeling. And so it just became channeling sessions. And I thought, where did this come from? Like it was so natural. And I won't say that my conscious mind, because I'm conscious while I'm doing this. I won't say that my conscious mind totally, like, in the background, I'm going, "Do we really want to say that? Is that okay?" I mean, I seriously, you know, my ego brain is back there going, "What is that?" So it's kind of funny, but yeah, I began channeling, and I thought, where did this come from? And that's when I thought, I have been doing this for myself for 14 years. In fact, over the last, I would say, I'd have to go back and look. I would say 4 or 5 years, um, maybe not that long. I would just write in my journal, what do I need to know today? And just write down the answers. Um, and this has just been a remarkable experience, and I'm learning. I'm learning to, because as I'm channeling sometimes, um, their family members will come in. And so then I'm able to share messages. So I'm now able to speak more freely, more openly about what I'm hearing, what I'm receiving, and say, okay, your grandmother is here, or your mother is here, or your son is here. And this is what he's showing me, this is what he's saying, this is the message. And so it's very, very, very much focused on the message, focused on the message. Um, and the messages that help people to heal. And that has been the focus. Okay, you guys, thank you for listening to all that. There's so much more I could share with you, but I and and you are my guinea pigs, because honestly, I'm used to speaking, but this is the first time I've ever shared this in this depth, in this, you know, broad focus. And so thank you for listening. I Go ahead. Sorry, you're muted, Catherine.
Okay. I
There you are.
I apologize for my technical skills.
Oh, you're fine.
I was trying to get in the room with you. So hold on a minute. Let me figure this out. Oh boy. Okay, here we go.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, awesome.
Just want to say thank you so much. I so appreciate you sharing your story, and I know that was not easy for you to do. Um, it just it just gives. I feel like that man was right. you're you are you're here doing this, and it's for a reason. It's to really help people.
Well, it's interesting, Catherine, because I was in the same rollover accident, and I had minor injuries. I mean, I had a fractured wrist and sprained shoulders, um, really relatively minor injuries. And I realized that there was a couple of things. One was that there's a reason I'm still here.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out what that was. Why was I still here? There was a reason I was still here. Um, the other thing was that I lost the thought. Bring it back to me. Well, it must not have been important.
It's okay. So, wow, you just shared so much with us, and I'm just so deeply grateful. Really, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. So I think we're going to take a minute just to breathe a second. There's a couple things that I just jotted down, and I love how you talked about the awareness of the angels and how they spoke so loudly to you, at different times in your life, and all of the miracles. Um, One of the things too I wanted to ask you about was that initial first, well, not first, but one of many, but that big experience that you had in the church where you were getting, I guess, like a hands-on healing from
Mhm.
somebody in the church. Was it the pastor or somebody there?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then um, the next day, I believe, is that when you had that big shift of feeling this joy and
It
everything
was that day.
was that day.
It
Okay.
was literally within hours. Like, I felt a shift immediately, but it was like it took some time. But by that night, like, I felt like a totally different person. It
Yeah.
was almost immediately. And in fact, I had some concerns when I felt this desire to help people, to share my story and an effort to help people. I was like, how can I talk about grief healing? I had this miracle. And I, so that was part of my block. I'm like, I can't promise people that they're going to get a miracle and that they're going to go from heavy grief, like heavy, heavy grief to, non-functioning grief to okay. And I mean, I can't promise that, right? It really, but I moved forward and I just trusted that I was being led and guided. It was really when I was writing my book that I had an answer to that. And the answer came, and it was, Julie, we needed you to understand the miracle of healing, no matter how it comes.
Mm.
We needed you to understand the miracle of healing.
Yeah. And I so understand about, your team, your angels working with you first to get through your own, not that you ever completely heal, because we're all,
Well, I will say, in this circumstance, and you mentioned that this is hard for you to share, it honestly isn't hard for me to share anymore.
Mm.
It really honestly isn't. And I know it's hard for people to understand. And a lot of people, feel like will grieve forever. But I think a lot of it has to do with language. I don't grieve. I do not grieve. In fact, I have such a such a beautiful relationship with my children here and there, right? I live in both worlds. I have a foot in this world and a foot in this world, and I have such a beautiful relationship with my children that and my brother that it's really not grief anymore at all.
Mm.
Um, and is there moments of sadness? And honestly, I used to feel moments of sadness on the anniversary of their death, but even that has kind of dissipated. I really had a miracle the year after they died on Mother's Day when my two oldest daughters, who were away at college, flew home and surprised us
Um,
that weekend.
yeah.
And I was so filled with gratitude
Mm.
to be a mom to these beautiful people, these beautiful humans. And I was so grateful. And I just, it changed, it changed that weekend for me forever. Like you would think that Mother's Day would then be hard, but I just saw it as a celebration of, having that privilege of being a mom. Um, so yeah.
That's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. There was one more question I wanted to ask you, but
Mhm.
it's my brain. So I think I think I'm gonna let Tina come in, and Tina will let
Hi,
you.
Julie. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I actually send you my website on Messenger if you want to take the time to check that out. Because I've been dealing with angels since I was 2 years old.
Uh,
um, anyways, prior to Catherine beginning to record this, you had mentioned that you had a message for the group.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. This is the trajectory of my experiences of it. So I began sharing angel messages online. It hasn't been that long ago, honestly. And I received a message at the beginning of January that I have not received because I have not shared. Because when I received it, I'm like, I can't share that. Oh my goodness, you guys, I am, the very first time that I had an experience where I woke up in the middle of the night and had this whole discussion with my angel team. I was 20 something, And I was awake in the middle of the night, and they said, you know, I'd been reading this book and they were giving me instruction. You need to go, it's time for you to do this. And I was like, well, I can't do that. I haven't, you know, and they're like, yes, it's time. And I'm like, but this and this. And they're like, but this. And, you know, they kept, I would be like, anyway, so this was the message that I received at the beginning of January. Well, I received a whole download today when I was doing my own journaling for myself, and I realized, I'm like, this isn't meant just for me, is it? And I was speaking here tonight, and so it felt very timely. But I'll first share the message that I received on January 4th that I still haven't shared, which I'm now prepared to share. But the message that I received on January 4th was, this is a time of great awakening. You are being called out of your slumber. Awake and arise to the power within you. Awake to the possibilities that are before you. Connect to your innate intuition, for you are a being of spirit and light, and as such, you have great strength, and you have access to great strength beyond your own. You are loved. So that was the initial message.
Love it. Beautiful. Thank you.
And that's meant for the audience. And then there's a longer message that I received today that's pretty interesting. Would you like for me to share that now, or do we want to take Greg's question first?
Well, what do you want to do?
Let's take Greg's question, and we'll let that first message just, you know, we'll give it some time to.
Okay.
I request that you share that message now.
Well,
Oh, okay, I'll do that. That's fine. That's great. I'll do that. Okay. Buckle your seatbelts.
love that.
Okay. As you're aware, okay, I need to give you some, just a tiny bit of context. I had a dream, going back to dreams, I had a dream a couple months ago. And for some reason this morning, this dream came to my mind, and I asked for more explanation of the dream. So this was the question that I asked. So I type out my question, and then I type with my eyes closed, so it's kind of a mess, and then I have to clean it up. The answer to the question. But the question that I asked, just for context, is, what can you tell me about my dream in which I was trying to get people's attention and they would not pay attention? Okay, so you don't need to know any more about the dream, but that's just kind of the background. And this is what I received. Okay. As you are aware, this is a foreshadowing of what is and what is to come. There is a division among the people, with many caught in the illusion of the story of struggle and war and contention and entertainment, numbing their concerns with a constant stream of unconscious behaviors that keeps them in a state of asleepness. It is time to awake. It is time to arise from the slumber that mankind has lulled themselves into. The coming days will be filled with new revelations as the light falls on the shadows of mankind and reveals the underbelly of the beast of greed, evil, and victimization of mankind. Some will wake up, some will see, but many will willingly continue to turn their heads in disbelief and go back to the programming of the modern age. They will continue to indulge in the programming of technology. It is not that technology is bad. In fact, technology is the vehicle by which those who are awake and enlightened reveal their messages. But the power that is controlling the world and the public desires to retain their power and will not allow others to see. And so they keep them in a state of asleepment. They used some words here that I'm like, that's not really a word. But that's okay, because that's the message. And so they keep them in a state of asleepment while they do their dirty deeds and control the public. And yet there will be those who will open their eyes, who will allow themselves to be awakened, who will arise from the slumber and heed the call to unite in divine glory. They will hold the light and keep the world from utter destruction. These are they who are called to shine their light. The energy of the earth is in upheaval. And as the upheaval increases in order to raise the vibration of your existence, or in other words, as the earth raises her vibration, it shakes up the world, and those who are no longer aligned with the higher frequency will be undone. They will run hither and thither and will not be able to find rest. Fear will increase in the population as they can't find answers because they have separated themselves from the source of the answers, and so the answers will not be forthcoming. Now is the time to align with the higher frequency so as to be prepared to rise above, to see what is happening from the vantage point of truth and knowledge, which is available through your inner knowing, which is connected to the divine power that is. All will not awake. All will not be ready. It is as it should be. All are not prepared, and they knew in their divine plan before they incarnated that they were not prepared, and that they would not make the cut, so to speak. They knew the circumstances in which they were incarnating, and yet they desired to experience the upheaval. They desired to experience the opportunity to try the experiment with living through the chaos in hope of awakening their higher consciousness. And in fact, in the days ahead, all will be given the opportunity to raise their consciousness even after they leave this plane of existence. So all is not lost, and there are other opportunities for them to learn and grow and evolve. Some will be taken from the earth before the next wave of frequency increases, as they have chosen to experience the earth only to a certain frequency, and then their mission is complete here because that is what they chose. Some have come at this time thinking that perhaps they can make it, and some will and others won't. But we use the term make it loosely because it is not as you comprehend that term. It is not a pass or fail system. It is a system of experimentation. The earth is a plane of extreme experimentation in this heavy density of reality. It is as if you are under the weight of the ocean, and yet your soul is not accustomed to this density. And so that is the challenge and the struggle. That's a lot.
It is a lot, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
It was pretty surprising when all that came through this morning.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us. Really, really beautiful. Glad
You're
we're recording.
welcome.
Yeah.
Greg, are you ready to ask your question now?
Bring 'em
Yeah.
in.
And that was amazing, and I appreciate your service and your sharing this all this stuff with us, especially that last message, which is, it resonates with a lot of other messages and teachings about, and thinking about my wife who passed away 4 months ago.
Oh, wow.
And and I know she's a beautiful spirit, and I feel her, but my experience, I'm in that fog, as
Yes.
far as trying to understand what she's saying, and the messages that I'm getting from, things that could be helpful in my grief and my healing process, and for others as well. What And I feel that, like, that analogy of being underwater, and with my soul not being real able to comprehend, or maybe I'm just not at the level maybe I'm not ready to understand certain things, but I want to understand certain things, and I want to get to that level where I can be more open to anyway. The messages that you get, without going too personal, from your clients and people that that have passed away, and even your kids,
Yeah.
can you share some of those messages without
Yeah, for sure. So okay, so a couple of things that I just want first, I want to share with you, Greg. It's okay to be in the fog of grief. Okay, I mean that's the most important thing to recognize, and also, I was actually I've done several readings for parents who've lost kids to suicide, and it's been, it's really interesting because everybody's messages are just so unique, and yet they're so loving and they're so hopeful. But I was doing a reading, and I've done readings for many people that are in grief, and so I just want to share that with you first. And one of the things that I've seen so many, like, it's when I'm doing these readings, I'm able to like see aura or see energy, in my mind's eye. And I was doing a reading for someone who had lost their son, and it had been less than a year. But he had these little snippets where he had felt his son. And what they showed me was like it was like his whole aura was like filled with with this cloud of grief. But then there would be these moments when the clouds would kind of separate or divide, and then he would receive these messages from his son. And then the cloud, that cloud of grief would overcome him again, or I don't, for lack of a better word, and then he would doubt. And so the message was, don't doubt the messages that you're receiving because when the cloud comes back in, it's like, oh, did I really receive that? Going back to that, when I was talking about kind of arguing with the spirit back when I was 20 something, in the middle of the night, I actually woke up my husband and I said, okay, I just heard this and I just need to tell you before I go to sleep, because I'll wake up tomorrow and be like, did I make that up? It's like that, right? It's like, it's capturing the message at the time of the message and trusting. And that's, I think that's one of the hard parts. It's been one of the hardest parts for me, is to just trust what we're receiving. I think I may be off topic, Greg. am, am I hitting anywhere near where your question was?
Well, like, were they like when you
Oh,
had, like,
yeah,
specific
yeah.
things that they could say, okay, well, this is definitely, like something that they could verification type of stuff, like say my cats, were, I was in a Zoom meditation meeting this morning, and one of my cats was vomiting while I was in the meeting, like something personal like that, or the other cat shitting on the floor or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
No,
So so when I receive messages for other people, um, it's very much about the message, but it's really interesting because there's always something in the message that they go, oh yeah, that's my mom. It's like, I remember I was talking to this one woman, and she had a lot of regrets about what had happened with her mother or grandmother, sorry, before she passed away. And her, her grandmother came in, and I don't like, channeling is really my thing, but then, sometimes this is what happens, and so I felt her grandmother come in, and her grandmother was giving her this assurance that everything was okay, that it was fine, um, but then there was a certain way. I can't remember now, because I'm just receiving and giving, so it's not like really it's not really going through my filter that much. So a lot of times I can't remember the messages, but there was something about the way, um, there's something, the way she said it. It's like, don't you know I'm okay? Or something like that. It was something, like, that's what I'm hearing. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's my grandmother. Like, so there's always this little nugget that's like, that just feels, reassuring that, yeah, that's who we're talking to.
Evidence of
Yeah,
this.
yeah. And, I'm studying evidential mediumship right now. But yeah, but my thing really is the channeling. It feels like that's my gift, but that's my focus, I should say, or that's my direction. But the mediumship sneaks in there too. When
thing that stood out to me, was when you questioned when you said, why did it have to happen like this when your kids died? And could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean, you got a response from what I remember saying that how would you have liked it to happen?
Yeah.
Did that? Did you get any more understanding of that over time, or?
Yeah, well, and here's what I truly believe. No one dies before their time. That's my personal belief. In fact, when the whole, COVID thing was happening, I told my kids, if I die by COVID, it's okay. It's my time. If I don't, then it's not my time. I didn't want anybody to be like, oh my gosh, it just is. And so when I received that message, how would you have liked it to happen? I went through all these different scenarios and I realized there was no good way. There was absolutely no good way. Imagine if my husband had been driving the car. Like how hard would it have been for me to, he's an angel because he has never blamed me. And I don't know that I would have been as gracious, honestly. Here I am, this contrary arguing with angels. But yeah, I just there was just no good answer to that. And so, and the other thing that, and actually this is interesting, Catherine, because this was the other thing I was going to say, is that when I came out of the fog of grief, when I had that lifting, when I came out of that darkness, I had this overwhelming understanding that I had everything that I needed to heal at the moment that the accident happened. So think about that for a minute. Everything that I required to heal was available at the time of the accident. But it took me time to metabolize the emotions. It took me time to grow into that understanding. It took me time to understand how to communicate with the other side. Like I'd already been communicating with the other side. I just didn't understand it. That's why I say, if I wrote my book today, I would write it differently than I did in 2020. It came out in 2020. I started writing it at the end of 2019, and it came out in the summer of 2020. Finished it in 2012 and in April, which that's a miraculous story too, because I was planning on self-publishing it, and I had a publisher reach out to me and say, are you, interested in, and it was only because a friend was talking to their editor and was sharing my story because of something else. And they said, does she want to write a book? And they had the exact same timing that I was planning on self-publishing, but it took all that work out of my hands because, I was just looking at a thing. I think I make like $2 for every dozen that are sold. But it's not about that, right? It's about getting the message out there.
That's right. That's right. One more thing. And welcome to my world of putting out music, as far as the money coming in.
I get it.
But yeah. So have you ever asked your kids like what's like their typical activities? Like I'm always curious what my wife is doing, is like what Nancy is doing. Can she be in two places at once? I know her sister, her closest sister probably needs her attention too. Can she, do you ever ask what's going on in their world? Are they incarnating? Are they able to communicate after they've incarnated somewhere? Are they out there? That's
Let me look and see if I can find, it seems like there might be let me see if I can find a message from Carrie that I received actually on her birthday this year. Is this, I'm just looking to see if I can. Okay. So hang on, let me just pull this up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I had written her a letter and I said, "It's your birthday. I remember how much you enjoyed you. I remember how much we enjoyed you being here with us, and I saw videos. I saw videos of your first birthday. You were so loved. All the kids were gathered around her. They could hardly stand to take turns. I actually had to take, because she was the fifth of six, and she was a year old. And I actually had to, all the other kids had to kind of go in the other room and watch while the one kid gave their present because they were all like on top of her. Anyway, so I just wrote her this letter, and oh, that was the other thing I didn't share with you guys. Oh my goodness. Holy cow. Okay, so I write, so this is the way that I communicate with them. Like I write letters, and then I hear the answers, and I write back. Oh, I wonder where that message is. Anyway, I after the trip last year, I was writing a letter to Carrie, and she said, because sometimes I'll feel them around, and so I'll go, okay, they've got a message, right? So I'll write a letter, and I'll hear the answer. And she said, "Mom, I was there. I got to help with the whales. It was so much fun."
Oh,
Isn't that amazing?
that's really great.
So amazing. But I feel like there's something in her response from her birthday letter. Because she gave some insight here. She said, because in my letter I was like, birthdays probably don't mean that much to you over there. um, She says, "I love you too. Thanks for remembering my birthday. You are right that time and space are different, and perhaps our earthly birthday in that incarnation does not mean as much here. However, I love to connect to you, no matter the occasion, and recognize that energetically birthdays hold energy on the earth plane." So it was sweet. But after they died, a friend of my daughter's actually had a dream, and we had experienced several deaths in our congregation in a month's time. And one was a young mother who was 30, and she gave birth and died 2 weeks later of cancer. And so she had these young children. And my daughter's friend, who was 12 at the time, 11 or 12, a few months later had this dream in which she saw Carrie and David, and they were in this, heavenly room. That's the way it looked for her. And then this mom that had died just a couple weeks before my kids did, maybe a month before the kids did, came in the room and said, "Carrie and David, it's time to go. We have work to do." But really, their work is here. This is their work. Their work is you. Their work is to help us in our, it's and and in my understanding is I have studied near-death experiences for years and years and years and years, and that it informed my healing process when my brother died, when my kids died. But as I understand it, when we leave this plane, there is healing to be done from our experience here. And so everyone is going to, how do we say this? It's just like here, right? We'll use education as an example. Here we'll have people that have a kindergarten education and never had any education past that, or no education, or you'll have a high school education, or you'll have a college education, or whatever. It's kind of this, it's kind of the same. My impression, my feeling, my understanding is that it's kind of the same thing. We're all just learning and growing, and we're all in different places in our growth cycle, which is why it's so important for us to be patient with everybody because we're all in different growth cycles. So I'm in a growth cycle right now where I can reach back and help those who are grieving. And then there were people in ahead of me when I was grieving that I was able to, lean on and experience. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I was also curious about how you communicate with your children. So I like that you told us about the writing and how important that is for the
I
community.
like capturing it. Like I can, do it in my head, but then I'm not capturing it. So
Yeah, it's great to journal and write those things down. All right. Thank you, Greg. I'm going to invite Edna to come in because Edna has a question. Oops, I did it again. Hold on a minute. So sorry. Okay, we can get us all back in the room. Okay.
hi, Anna.
Hi, I loved your story. It's so moving. And I guess I was following the thread that Catherine just brought up about how were the siblings or your children, the surviving children, able to process that they had lost siblings? And were they able to help you in your grieving, or you helped them before you found your calling?
It's challenging. When everyone has experienced such a tremendous loss, it's really challenging to help each other because we're all struggling. And so, you do the best you can. And this brings up a really interesting experience that I had. So my oldest two daughters were away at college. And then the two boys were the only ones left at home. And I'd homeschooled for years. So, we had all been home. And so the two boys were 12 and 15. So remember, my son was injured in the accident, and then the 15-year-old brother, which a few years later, a couple years later, maybe it was, I guess it was a couple years later, the 15-year-old who was 17 at that point said, I have always felt so guilty. I felt like if I had been on the trip with you, it wouldn't have happened. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it works. But, and it was good to have had that conversation, but he held on to that for a while. But I had so much guilt, not only for the accident, but for the fact that I had been I had been a mom that had participated with her kids. I was homeschooling, right? And when the kids died, I checked out. And here I've got these teenage boys. And I'm like, they grew up in a totally different household than their older sisters did. And I had such guilt about that. I mean, everybody, if you're a mom, you know about mom guilt, which I have let go of. But I had so much guilt about it. And I was really in contemplation about that and prayer about that. And the message that I received was, Julie, this is their experience too. So we come here with these soul plans, and they interlap. And that was their experience, to grow up in their teenage years with a mom who was not very present. I did the best I could. And that was enough. That was okay.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here we go, Anthony.
Hi, Anthony.
Yeah. Hi, Julie. First, thank you for sharing your story. It really was amazing and moving and very inspiring. And you really just kind of answered part of my question, or maybe a lot of it in what you just said. But and of course, no pressure to go into any further details than what you're comfortable with. But I'm very, very curious about how you dealt with the sense of guilt over the years, because at least for me in my healing journey, the further I go, the more I find personally that it feels a lot easier to me to forgive other people compared to really authentically forgiving myself for things I feel guilty about. So I was just wondering about what your journey with that was like, and how you got to a place where you really could look at yourself and truly release that sense of guilt?
When I'm thinking back because I did a whole presentation on this, but it's been a while ago. Really trying to connect to that again, and I talked about it in the book, but it's a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I think when, again, even going back to that channeled message, it's like having access to that divine, that inner, like we have that, and I have seen it so much more in the last few months than I ever have before. That soul light that's within us, and really tapping into that and remembering who we are. We talk about, like, it's very common, for example, in the Christian religion, to talk about Christ descending from heaven to be incarnated on this earth. But we don't consider the fact that we do the same thing. We come from divine source. And to come here into this incarnation, we descended. Now, are we the, master teachers like Jesus? Maybe not, right? But we also come from divinity. We are divine. And when we start to recognize our path as a divine path that we have planned before we came, I've been through, like, I had a father that was very angry, went through some tremendously difficult things growing up and never was able to reconcile those things. So, that created some upheaval in our household. I became very ill in college, had to drop out, because of illness. I lost my brother, Sis. I mean, I've had just challenges after challenges after challenges, and having to deal with the grief of lost opportunities and lost people and lost yeah, I could tell you a lot of stories, but I won't. And there was after I remarried, Ron and I've been married for 30 years now, so I'm grateful that we've been able to make it through the challenges that we faced. But I remember after we got married, and looking back on all the chaos that was, and thinking, I don't know what line I stood in heaven, but I stood in the wrong line. I just like, and how do I undo this contract that I created for myself, that I would do all these, that I would face all these things? Like, how do I get off this track? And I kind of laughed about it. And I actually had just gotten to that point where I was thinking, okay, life is good. I can settle, I can calm this overactive nervous system from all the, because my brother died, and, it wasn't long after that my husband went off the deep end, and like it was just a lot. And I thought I can calm down. And then, it was a couple years later, the kids died. And so, yeah, I think when we allow ourselves to just recognize that there's a greater purpose, there's a greater plan, that we always have agency, we always have free will, and even we had free will before we came here, right? That's why we're here. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but
No, that is helpful. Thank you very much for answering my question.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. All right. So do we have any other questions, comments, or anything anybody want to share? I just want to, I'll jump in and just share that, your story is, it's just so beautiful in that, um, that you listened. You went through really challenging, really challenging things, but you always listened to what was happening, your intuitive guidance, and you trusted that, you know? And so, and I can imagine that you really helped so many people that have gone through grief and loss, especially with young children. I'm sure that they really will hear your story, and it gives them so much hope. I'm wondering if you
Well,
teach
well,
parents.
I will say though, I just want to say, I don't always listen. Like I even shared with you tonight how I argue with it. But eventually I get out of my own way and move forward.
I'm wondering if you teach parents how they can establish that relationship with their children in spirit. The ones that are open to that.
I think that is the next thing, right? Is to teach people, not just parents, but teaching everyone. And even as I was just it's interesting that you asked that question, because as I was just contemplating this, and because um I love doing readings for people. It's just such a joy, and but at the same time, and I want to continue to do that because it really is a joy. But at the same time, I hope, my greatest hope is that it opens up for them their trust in their own intuition and their own knowing, that it confirms for them their unique authority. And I like, I like going to other people too and getting kind of that, okay, am I on the right track here? Am I like, is this crazy? Or so
Mediums every now and then too. Yeah.
yeah, I started teaching, I actually started teaching a class last year. I don't have one planned yet this year, but I did some workshops, which I called Angel Intuition. And I taught people about the clairs, and I actually didn't even use the word clairs because sometimes that's off-putting to people. So I just talked about, seeing, hearing, the spiritual gifts and how we use those to connect to angels, to connect to our guides and so forth, and seeing those, developing those gifts and recognizing them.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much. So I'm just going to give a shout out to anybody else that has any other questions or comments. Oh, we have Tina. Hold on, Tina. I'm going to.
I wonder if Catherine, may I speak?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, I want to share about the guilt because I get it. I get messages for my clients when they come and see me, and they're always guilty about something when they lose loved ones.
100%.
And what spirit says on a regular basis is that guilt serves no one. It's all about taking the lessons from the previous experience and utilizing it from now on.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I saw this, like, when I'm doing grief work, I talk about that frequently, the guilt that we carry for different things. Either it's the last conversation or there's so much. And it was interesting when my husband's mother died, and she was in her 80s and had poor health for a time, for quite a while. And it was interesting, even in that situation, to overhear my brother-in-law say, "Oh, we should have taken her to the hospital sooner," or something like that. So it's just innate for us to feel that way and to think, "Oh, I could have done something different, or I should have done something different." But certainly, and that's a big piece. Our our angels are not judging us, and our loved ones have gone to the other side, are seeing things from a much broader perspective than we're seeing things, and they're like, let go of that. Like, we're not carrying it, why should you?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I've had to learn in my life is self-love. You know,
Mm.
and self-love is a big one, and that took me many, many years. I'm still not all the way there. There's still some things I'm working on, but I mean, I think I've come a long way. But I remember just asking out loud, like, how do I do that? How do I do that? But I think what you're talking about is
The big
forgiving
piece.
ourselves for things that we feel like we could have done differently or better, or, we're a work in progress here, and we're always learning and growing. And as long as we're in these human forms, none of us are perfect, and we all have things to work on. So
Can I share something with you real quick? I know we're out of time, but this is a folk art painting that I did in honor of my daughter a few years ago. And there's little words and messages on here of love, forever, beautiful, yeah, fly.
see one more time. It's gorgeous. Oh, it's so beautiful. I love it. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah. So do you do a lot of art?
I, yeah, I've got my easel over here with a half painted canvas that's been sitting there for months. Yeah, I need to I want to get back to it. I love to do intuitive art. This folk style is not, yeah, I do a lot of abstract, a lot of floral, but anyway, yeah, it's fun. Somebody had a question. I'm curious what the next state of frequency increase. I'm not sure. I know that I've studied astrology and different things, but I can't tell you. I'm not sure that we know. There's some astrological signs that are coming up, but I'm not sure that we know. I know a couple people that might be familiar with that, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Catherine?
I just heard that we're going into the new phase of Aquarius now. As of January 20th, the old phase ended. I think that was it Pisces? I don't know. It was something a little more not as enlightening, but now we're stepping into this whole new phase of Aquarius. So I don't know that
We
much
are.
about astrology and all that, but I think
Yeah, we are going into the Aquarian age, and the date of that shift is like kind of like a morphing, is what I'm gathering, and there's differing ideas on when that actually is. I just want to thank you guys for your messages here. I just wanted to read let's see if there's any, okay. Thank you. Thank you for your messages.
yeah. We have one more question. Is that okay? Are you okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to bring you in, Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Catherine. Hi. So yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again, Catherine, for having another amazing talk tonight. And to everybody here, yeah, I feel like everything you've said tonight, Julie, is, of course, I feel like you're always in the right place, right time. You need to hear what we need to hear. Everybody in this group, I feel like is, on the path to waking up. Like you said, that your message that you received about some will wake up and some won't. I feel like that's perfect for tonight, that we know there's people that are in our lives that, in fact, I feel like a lot of us have really had to let go of a lot of people in the last year or two, of just like that you knew were toxic. Like, I can't live with this person who has narcissistic tendencies. We just had to let go of a lot of people. Of course, a lot of people crossed over, since COVID, and they're leaving. And like you said, it's like, it's all divinely timed. We all have a contract. We all came in. I love that you're like, why did I sign up again for this? Because there's times I say the same thing. My daughter's an old soul, and she's like, Mom, really? What was I thinking? And I'm like, I don't know, but you and I have this contract and we're here. And I feel like we're like this. So it's like, I'll look at her and I'll be like, are you having a really bad you're in a depression. She's like, yes. And I'm like, yeah, me too. We're like, but you can't go because, stay, you gotta
Mm.
stay. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for everything you said tonight, because it all just resonated completely, because I could see people from the other side. My dad crossed recently, and for the man who lost his wife, Greg, I just wanted to say, um, yeah, my dad came in, it was 18 months ago now, but I see him often. He came in like every day he'd ride with me to work. He would just get in the car, take a ride with me. I was like, hey, what's up, Dad? So yeah, as we know, like they are always with us, always around us. And I feel like what they do on the other side, my dad he loved to play saxophone. So he played music for about 70 years. He lived till 90. So when I've seen him on the other side come in, he's not playing because he's talking to me, but that's what he's doing over there. He's working on his music. He also liked to fly small planes. I haven't seen him doing that, but whenever I look up and see a little plane go by in the sky, I'm like, hey, yeah, good day to fly, Dad. So yeah, I guess thank you for everything.
Yeah.
That just reminded me that like I've been stuck in that ego wanting to fight, like that, like, oh well, you should just like leave, just have an accent, like just go. And there's the other side, like my soul is like, heck no, you've done like 30 years of work here, you're not going, you need to be here, you're here because I feel like I need to get out there, write a book, I need to give medium messages. So thank you, because I'm like, frying pan on the head, like there's a reason everybody is here. So like I feel like we need that to keep going. And as far as 2024, everybody, I just know from like people online, um, Lee Harris channels.
Mhm.
I'm sure I used to listen to Lee Carroll. And 2020, they said like 2020, 2012, of course, the Mayan calendar, right? That we've been going through the last 12 years, and this has been like the ascension, like the major part, right? And Catherine, you agree, right? So I heard 2024 is going to get way better. So if you, yeah, please. So it's like we've made it through, and I feel like we just lost so many people the last few years. I lost 3 people in the last year, and it's just like,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, we've just been all going through so much clearing. It's like letting people go, letting relationships go, moving somewhere new. So I feel like just everybody sit tight, because I feel like there's something better is coming this year for all of us. So hopefully that's our
Oh,
message. So thank you. Thanks again.
yeah.
Mhm.
I wondered whether or not I should share. Thank you, Amy. I wondered if I should share this last bit. And then when you said what you said, I'm like, I got this. Yes, you're supposed to share it. So after I received that message, my next question is, what is my role in this time? What is my role in this whole thing that, was just received? And I have felt like this message is not just for me, it's for you guys, as light bearers. Like that, this is because people who have had these spiritual experiences, have had near-death experiences, are here to inform, to educate, anyway. So um this was their message. Your role is to be a light. So this is for you guys. Your role is to be a light bearer, to learn these things and be prepared to teach others as they are awakened to this knowledge. And in their infancy, they will not understand their experience. So you are prepared to offer answers and guidance and direction from this vantage point on the earth plane. Of course, everyone also has their spirit guides, but just like flying a plane, you can have the instrument and not know how to use it. And so that is your role, to awaken and be a light and show the way. Anyway, and that's the main part there. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
I love that. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you. That's great.
All right. So it looks like we're coming up to the final last couple minutes, and unless anybody else has a question, I think we're gonna sign off, but I want to just say thank you so much for being with us tonight, Julie, and for sharing your story and your wisdom. And I want to tell you that you're always welcome to be part of our community. Anytime we have a meeting, please come. I'm going to send you emails.
Okay, sounds good. I look forward to getting them.
We'd love to have you come back as a participant. We have our safe space sharing group that meets on the first Tuesday of the month. And we also have our UFO ET experiencers, which meets on the second Tuesday of the month. So you're welcome to come to all of those. And people that have had UFO ET have also had mediumship experiences and NDEs and all kinds of STEs. So it all kinds of overlaps and intertwines. So, but we're a fun group and we're all very open to this stuff. So thank you. Thank you again for being here with us. We so appreciate you. And want to tell everybody thank you for being here tonight and sharing with us and for being part of this community. And I love all of you. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Night.
Night.